Hello everyone, welcome to the final event in our fall sustainability series, Electric Vehicles. My name is Julian and I'm one of the librarians here at Newton. I'd also like to thank New TV for filming today's program, and I'd like to thank Newton for partnering with the library for the sustainability series this fall, and the EV Task Force, who many are here tonight, for co-sponsoring tonight's program. I'm pleased to introduce our presenters who will guide us through the ins and outs of electric vehicles. Please join me in welcoming Judy, first of all, from Green Newton, and then Leslie Zebrowitz, Ross Bloom, Alan Lebowitz, and Anna Vandersbeck. Thank you.
Thank you, and I would like to thank Julian and Lynn from the library for co-sponsoring with us, as well as the EV Task Force. I am Judy Lara-Jacobs with Green Newton, and how many of you are Green Newton members? So, all of you know that Green Newton works with residents, the government, and businesses to inspire actions that protect the environment and the climate. And we are thrilled to work with the EV Task Force on this presentation. And I am going to just, I think I will read people's introduction now, so then you can just go from one to the other. And we are waiting for one of the presenters, so we will see if Anna can make it. But Leslie Zebrowitz is an Emerita, professor of psychology at Brandeis University in 2019. Shortly after replacing her 17-year-old Toyota with an EV, she accepted Philip Vergat's invitation to join him in beginning the Newton EV Task Force. The task force works with the city to provide residents with all the information they need to purchase an EV, more charging infrastructure, and a transition to electric school buses. Ross Bloom is a Newton resident and founder of Revvit, a startup building low-cost and accessible EV charging infrastructure. He is passionate about demystifying EVs and making the transition to electric transport available to all. Alan Lebowitz is our counselor at large from Ward 6. He's a retired physician who has held leadership positions in large multi-specialty medical groups. He has also served as president of 2 independent day schools. One of his top priorities as a city councilor is to support efforts to reduce greenhouse gases in our city. Anna might join us later. She is from the Electric Vehicle Program Director at Green Energy Consumers Alliance, and hopefully we'll see her at the end. So Leslie, do you want to start?
Okay. So I guess, are we going to talk from the podium? Is that the plan?
Oh, you can stay here.
Oh, all right.
And you can move it forward if you need to look.
Oh,
look at it.
You want me to control it? Okay.
Yeah.
This is the forward?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to just give an overview about electric vehicles. I'm going to talk about why we should buy them, when we're going to make the transition, and what are the facts about electric vehicles that are relevant to whether or not you want to buy one.
Put your mic near your gun.
Oh, can you hear me better?
Yeah. Much better.
Oh, sorry, okay. Well, you saw the sign, so I don't have to say it again, right? Okay. So why electric vehicles? This is one big reason why. We're having horrible climate disasters all over the country, fires, floods, huge hurricanes, and these unprecedented climate disasters are due to greenhouse gases, or at least they're fueled by too much greenhouse gases. This may seem overwhelming, but if we all take significant actions, like transitioning to electric vehicles, then we can really do something about this problem. So, electric vehicles are good for the climate. This little pie chart shows that most of the carbon emissions that individuals in Massachusetts are responsible for come from their transportation. Electric vehicles are also good for our health, and that's because gas-powered vehicle emissions produce not only greenhouse gases that are bad for the climate, but the emissions produce particulates and other things, bad chemicals, that are a very serious problem for health. things ranging from eye irritations to cancer. And importantly, electric vehicles drastically reduce carbon emissions. And this figure shows the grams of carbon emissions per mile in New England. If you drive a gas-powered vehicle, it's 381. If you drive a plug-in hybrid, it's about half that. And if you drive a fully battery electric car, it's about a quarter of that. And if you plug in your fully battery electric car into an outlet that uses Newton power source energy, then it's 100% green. And in Newton, actually, the default is about, I think it's 82% now of the electricity.
92.
Oh, it's 92.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. It's gone up since I last looked. Okay,
Yes.
so 92%. So you're pretty much doing it without taking any action, although people do have the option to opt out from this. So people sometimes say, but it costs more carbon to manufacture an electric vehicle, and so really they're not as good. Well, it does take more, and this graph shows that there are about 9 metric tons more carbon emitted when an electric car is manufactured than when a gas-powered car is manufactured. But that difference is totally outweighed by the total lifetime greenhouse gas emissions of a gas-powered vehicle versus an electric vehicle. So you can see here the blue part of the bars is the manufacturing, and it's bigger in the EV, but the red is the lifetime emissions, which makes up a huge amount of the difference. There's another interesting thing in this graph, which I'll just point out, and that it shows the emissions of EVs in the US and compares it to Canada. And you can see that Canada is much better in the lifetime emissions, and that's because their grid is much greener than in the US. Of course, as I said, in Massachusetts, you're using pretty green electricity. We're going to hold the questions till the end.
No, but a quick clarification. What is the lifetime? How many years?
I don't know the answer to that, but it's probably at least as long as the car is warranted for, which would be an electric car would be 8 years or 100,000 miles. But people usually drive longer than that. So when will automobile greenhouse gas emissions be eliminated? I want to insert an answer to a different when question first, which is, well, so when should you buy an electric vehicle? And the answer to that is, don't run out and buy one if you already have a perfectly good car, because actually we don't want to throw out perfectly good cars because it burns greenhouse gases to create a new car. But when you're ready to buy a new car, that's when you should do it. And then more on the when. There are some electrification goals that have been established federally and also in the state of Massachusetts and also in Newton. So the Newton Climate Action Plan has a target, and that is that 10% of the vehicles be electric by 2025. The federal government has a target, it's a different metric, but it's that 50% of new car sales should be electric by 2030. And there's a California rule that binds Massachusetts, and there are about 17 states that kind of do what California does. And their rule is that 100% of new car sales have to be electric. It could be plug-in hybrid or fully electric, although there's limits on how many of them can be plug-ins. And that's by 2035, 100%. So how is Newton doing in meeting these targets? I'll go through this graph that shows the growth of electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids in Newton from 2020 to 2024. These data come from a website that was just established a couple years ago, and you can see the green bar shows the percentage of all cars in Newton that are either fully electric or plug-in hybrids. We're not doing so great, but we're improving. In 2020 it was 2.33%, and in 2024 it is, I can't read it, 8.03%. Okay? So it's been kind of a steady increase, but we need to have a steeper curve to reach our goal of 10% vehicles electric next year. Right? The yellow-orange line shows the percentage of all new car sales in each year that were electric or plug-in hybrid. And there, things are doing better, but it's still, we had a downfall from 2023 until 2024. I can't analyze why, but it was up to 24% and then down to 20%. So, just to put some real numbers on it, there are about 55,000 cars in Newton. Of those, about 4,400 are either plug-in hybrids or electric. I was surprised at this low number because when I walk down the street, I feel like I just see a Tesla every other car, but it's not really true. There aren't that many. And we need, so that's 8%, we need 10% by next year. So we really have to buy a lot of cars in the next year to meet that target, which is not a very aggressive target. So what makes people hesitate to switch? Well, there are probably many reasons. One, I think early on, might have been true that they thought, well, there aren't many exciting choices, but now you can get just about any car in the car you want. They're all models, sedans, SUVs, whatever, and they're really fun to drive. For me, the best thing is the acceleration. I always drove this 4-cylinder Toyota that when I needed to merge into fast traffic on the highway, I kind of just held my breath and hoped it would be okay. With this car, you don't have to worry about merging into heavy traffic. But also, it's quiet, you don't have to deal with the fumes of the gas station, the ride is smooth, and the cargo space is amazingly large because there's no engine. So like I have a front trunk and a back trunk, and the back trunk has a really deep well under it because there's no drivetrain or anything. So price is another thing that may deter people. But it turns out that many are less expensive than you might think, even if you just look at the manufacturer's recommended retail price. But Anna, if she shows up, will tell you that there are other things that lower that. So this is the price in thousands of dollars, and there are some that are under $35,000, and then there are many that are under $50,000. And as I said, Anna Vanderspreck will talk about financial incentives that can bring that price down by $10,000. Also, the price, even if you pay a little more, your maintenance costs are going to be way lower. So these pictures aren't the best, but the left one tries to show you what's inside a gas-powered car, and there are about 2,000 moving parts. I remember the first car I ever bought. I was a graduate student, it had some problems, I took it in, he said, your camshaft. I said, what's a camshaft? Anyway, so there are all these things that I never heard of that can break. In an electric vehicle, there are less than 20 moving parts. In addition, the one thing that all cars have, there's Anna. Hi, Anna. Thank you for coming out in this horrible weather.
Sorry I'm late.
That's okay. So, obviously all cars have brakes, and you have to replace your brakes. But electric cars have this regenerative, they call it one-pedal driving. When I first told my friends about this, they thought there was no brake pedal, but there is a brake pedal. You can stop quickly if you need to. But if you just take your foot off the gas, the car slows down, and you soon learn how to time it so that it stops by the time you get to a red light, or it stops by the time you get to a stop sign, so you don't put as much wear and tear on your brakes. Oh, I'm sorry, no wonder I'm pushing the wrong button. So range anxiety, that's a big factor that might deter people from making the switch. But the EV range has gone up enormously since the early days, and the typical range you see here is between 200 and 360 miles, or at least between 200 and 300 miles, which is pretty respectable. And actually, I don't know if there are any people here who are not part of the EV task force, but I have some handouts, and one of them is a list of the ranges and manufacturer prices for all EVs and plug-in hybrids on the market in 2024 that I'll put out. So then there are charging concerns that people may have, and Ross Bloom is going to talk about that. So to summarize, electric vehicles are good for climate and they're good for health. Newton citizens aren't switching quickly enough. Even though range anxiety is a thing of the past and EVs are in fact affordable, so don't postpone making the switch, and maybe we can hit our 10% 2025 target. And thanks for coming, and many thanks to Green Newton and the Newton Library for organizing this event. I guess.
Thanks, Leslie.
Here's the.
Okay, thanks. All right, yes, I'm here to help resolve all of your charging conundrums. So we're going to talk about EV charging, and it is different from the way that you fill up a gas tank in a gas car. In a few ways, there's a few big ones that I'm going to talk about here. The biggest one, I think, is that most people do almost all of their charging at home overnight. It's not like you have to drive to a charger every time you need to fill up your battery. Most of your routine business, you're going to be able to charge at home, and you'll wake up in the morning with a full battery. You don't even have to think about it. It just makes it a lot easier, and people talk about the sort of inconvenience of EV charging, but think about the inconvenience of driving to a gas station and having to fill up there. That's still, time and effort to do that. So there's a real benefit with the EVs that in a lot of cases you just don't even have to think about it. You park in the spot that you like to park at home, plug in, and go in and continue your evening, and you'll be your car will probably be done charging by midnight, and you don't have to worry about whether you're going to have enough charge in the morning. And that's sort of similarly the idea of EV charging. A lot of it is passive rather than active. So you can be doing other things while your car is charging because it's just parked, and you're whether you're on vacation, you're going doing a fast charge and going to have lunch. You don't have to be standing, even at a public charger, you don't have to be standing next to the charger the whole time that it's working. It just makes it a lot, in a lot of ways, just a lot more easy to kind of plan around your charging schedule if you are, out on vacation. Whereas a gas station, you have to stand there and, keep the nozzle in the car. There's different use cases for public chargers versus gas stations. Again, you're not going to a public charger unless you don't have a charger at home, but a lot of people do have the ability to put a charger at home, so they're using public chargers a lot less frequently than typical gas cars would use gas stations. And there's also this opportunity, because you're just doing it at home, you can just keep topping up every night, and you get, you start at 80%, you go down to 60%. It's easy enough to just plug in and get back up to 80%. You don't have to wait until you get all the way down to zero and then do the whole thing all over again. It just makes it, just again, it's about creating a routine that just makes it a no-brainer and really easy to do on a consistent basis. There's 3 levels of charging. At home, most people are doing either level 1 or level 2 charging. Level 1 is just like plugging into a normal outlet, which is a slow rate of charge, which will get you about, depending on your car, between 2 and 5 miles per charging hour. So like overnight, you would cover about 40 miles, for instance, of charge, which is more than what people typically charge in a given day. So a lot of people find that that's like easy enough to get by with. But others will say, I want to have a guarantee that my battery will be full every morning. And so they would opt for a level 2, which depending on your living situation, may cost you an extra $1,000 or give or take to put that in. But once you have it, it's there, and you don't have your cost of charging is so much lower than what you were paying for gas anyway that it's it kind of washes out after a certain period of time. And then DC fast charging is typically, when people talk about public charging, a lot of those are going to be DC fast chargers. Some of them are going to be like the ones here at the library are level 2 chargers that are public. But if you're going on a road trip or something like that, a lot of times you're going to be looking at finding DC fast chargers, which are the closest thing to a gas station type of experience. Plugs is confusing, but your car will have one of these options of plugs that you can plug into. So you can see over here, I'm just going to show you some examples of like actual chargers This is a Tesla charger, so originally was only compatible with Tesla cars, but now it's going to be opening to more types of cars. And so this large number of different types of plug shapes are now getting consolidated down so that everything is going to look like this supercharger plug. That's going to become the North American standard. So it's, most cars that you're going to buy from here on in are going to have that kind of plug on them. So that's a Tesla charger. Those are really, easy to use and everything. This is a ChargePoint level 2 charger, which is similar to the ones that we have at the library here. If you were going to the library for an hour, you could plug into that and get, 30 miles of range or so. This is a home charger, just a random example of a home charger. That just shows it's just something that hangs on your garage and you park and just plug it into your car and then you walk away. It's really easy to use. And then this is an example of a public DC fast charger from Revvit, but there's a lot of different companies and networks out there. This is a map of the fast charging infrastructure around southern New England, and this is in Newton in particular, including fast chargers and slower chargers. You can see it's a pretty good coverage, and again, a lot of the time you're just going to be charging at home anyway, so you may not even need to use the local public chargers, but just so you know that there are a good number of them. So super important to keep an easy charging routine. Like if you can have a charger at home, do that. If you can't have a charger at home, talk to someone in the EV task force and they'll give you advice for how to get that. Just sort of have a routine before you buy the car, because if you get the car and then you don't have a routine, it'll be really confusing and annoying for you. And you'll figure it out, but it'll just take a couple weeks, so it'll be a little bit painful. Charging curves is sort of a kind of a more advanced thing that I won't get too much into, but pretty much when you're using a public charger, it starts off really fast and then it gets slower as your battery gets fuller, because the electrons don't have as much space to find, places to safely charge your battery with. So what I do when I go to public fast chargers, to sort of keep it down to a very quick turnaround, I'll take my battery down all the way to 10% and then I'll go to a public charger, so that when I plug in within 5 minutes, I've already got another 30% of my battery, and then I can just unplug and go home. I can answer more questions about that, but I think it's really useful to know about that, to not have to deal with spending a lot of time at the fast chargers. Keeping battery at 80% max, you don't usually charge your battery up to 100% because that will damage your battery. And then utilizing presets and controls on your car app. So each of the cars will come with an app where you can choose what time of day you want to charge, how much you want to charge up to, all that kind of thing. You just set it and then forget it, and it makes everything really easy. I guess we'll wait for questions at the end. Is Al next? All right, next will be Counselor Zebrowitz.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott.
This one, the one that, yeah.
So I've been tasked to talk a little bit about what's going on with school buses in Newton. And I'm really new to all of this. I'm a relatively new counselor, and I became involved in the EV task force, or supporting them, I should say, only in the past few months. And so certainly not the expert in this area that you've been listening to. But I was asked to talk about the electrification, the effort to electrify school buses in Newton. Before I go on to the advantages, which were covered in part by Leslie, I just wanted to give just a few facts about the school buses in Newton. We have 43 school buses. They make over 180 runs per day for the schools, and additional runs for the sports program. So they're used heavily. And so that's important to know because we're very reliant on diesel buses right now. We do contract with Eastern Bus for bus services, so Newton does not own buses, it leases buses, and that's a factor in our ability to leverage or transition into electric school buses. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. So again, Leslie reviewed a little bit about this, but just to go over some health issues. Diesel exhaust contains both carbon particulates and 40 chemicals. Exposure to particulates is associated with an exacerbation of asthma, decreased lung function, and retarded lung development. Third, diesel exhaust is classified as a probable carcinogen, and it includes benzene, 1,3-butadiene, and soot, all classified as known human carcinogens. And toxic air pollutants remain in the cabin of the bus during the ride. I think that's important to emphasize because I think a lot of people might think, oh, it's just going out into the atmosphere. But, you know, buses are porous. In nicer weather, windows are open, so there is a retention of these pollutants, shall I say, within the bus cabin. So the children, mostly children obviously here, are exposed to this continuously during these bus rides, and some of the bus rides can be pretty long. In terms of climate impact, transportation is the largest contributor to greenhouse gases in Massachusetts. The Newton Climate Action Plan addresses this by requiring the electrification of all city fleets. Each electric school bus emitted 181 fewer metric tons of carbon dioxide per bus than its diesel counterpart. And in terms of cost savings, we can't speak specifically about cost savings in Newton. So this data comes from other literature looking at, across the United States. But it is a ballpark, and I think it's helpful as a frame of reference for what we're talking about. A 2024 study estimated the per mile benefits of replacing diesel buses with electric ones in 3,108 U.S. counties. It considered costs of maintenance and repair, the environmental impact of diesel emissions, and the dollar value of new childhood asthma cases and deaths that could be attributed to such pollution. And it concluded that replacing the average diesel bus would generate a benefit of $84,200 per bus, split nearly evenly between health and climate effects. And then in terms of the challenges in Newton, we have to park these buses when they're not being used, so that's the term depot. And the city does not currently own the land for a bus depot. The current vendor, meaning our current Eastern Bus, rents a lot or lots for the depot. Charging, need for charging stations for electric buses, so we don't have that. So that would have to be built up as sort of the infrastructure. And the cost, the contract for leasing buses and cost is under the school committee's purview. This is a very important thing for people to understand. It's not the mayor or the city council. It resides in the school committee and the superintendent. And so any cost or cost for this system would have to come from their budget, which obviously is provided by the city as a whole. It's part of the city budget. But when that budget is determined and they're given the money, they have to consider spending money relative to other needs for the school system. So there is this problem of a conflict of goals, so to speak, within the city that I think is also somewhat problematic. We're experiencing that, as we speak. We've had many conversations with the school committee, the superintendent about this. And we understand that their mission is to improve the education of the students, their primary mission. And that's a huge task, a lot of work to be done. So the point is that this effort to transition to electric buses, in a way, is competing with other things that the school committee rightfully needs to address. But it is an issue that we have to deal with. Initial EV bus cost is up to 3 to 4 times the cost of a diesel bus. So that just gives you one example of the challenge of the cost, the initial cost anyway. So the cost savings obviously are over time, but there has to be money up front to be able to purchase these buses. So that's a challenge. And the current bus company leases land for bus depot, for our bus depot, at a cost of about $300,000 per year. A lot of money. So again, how do we move with all these challenges from this current situation to a future of electric school buses? So just to throw out a few potential solutions, Newton could own, I should say, or directly lease the bus depot locations. The challenge of that is that the school bus company requires that, or needs for the buses to be within a certain area of Newton, or within a certain area outside of Newton, so that if there's a problem with a bus, another bus can quickly get to the route and transport the students. So the depot has to be within Newton, let's say within Newton. And the city has very little, if any, land that could be used for that purpose. So ideally, if we had the land, it would just be given for the school buses, and then we'd save that $300,000 a year, which would be a huge savings. But again, that's a challenge. We don't really have the land unless something is changed or freed up. But that's going to be difficult. Applying for grants to cover some of the costs, and those are available, and I think that will be addressed. Ensure multiple bidders for a contract. The only bidder for the school buses that we have was the one we have, the Eastern. So without competition, that's another challenge, to get the price down and to work with us. And the fourth potential solution is not to convert all the buses at the same time, but just to start with a few of them with charging stations. That's less money. It could demonstrate the values of electric buses and convince our residents that it's worth investing and get some public support for this transition to an all-electric bus. I think that's it for now. So thank you very much for listening.
Hi, everybody. Oops. Are you hearing it through the audio? Cool. Hi, everybody. My name is Anna, and I am here late, but luckily still kind of on time to talk about electric vehicle incentives. So I'm focusing specifically on purchase incentives, and most of this is specifically for individuals, but there are also incentives for commercial entities and public entities to buy electric vehicles, but I only have 5 minutes, so we're focusing on individuals. And I'll ask, who already has an EV? Is it basically everybody? Almost everybody, okay. So, I will go through this, but you let me know if you want more depth on any of this.
It's being recorded, so those people might not.
On TV.
Oh, hello, people on TV, okay, people on TV might know, great. So, my name is Anna, as I mentioned, I work for a nonprofit organization called Green Energy Consumers Alliance. We're a state-based nonprofit, we work in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, and our mission is all about empowering consumers and communities to speed a just transition. So we have lots of different programs and services that help people access clean energy technologies. I focus on electric cars, but we've got other programs on heat pumps and solar and renewable energy, etc. And we also do public policy advocacy work at the state level, where I see the Newton EV task force all the time. So that's just a quick intro. What I'm going to cover is specifically purchase incentives for consumers, the federal tax credit for electric vehicles, and the Massachusetts More EV state rebate. I'll note that if you happen to drive for Uber or Lyft or own a taxi company, there's other incentives under a program called Ride Clean Mass, but we're not going to spend any time on that today. I only have a couple minutes, but I wanted to flag real quick. There are incentives for installing charging too, from Eversource and also the State Department of Environmental Protection for certain commercial entities and public entities. And there are incentives for municipalities to purchase EVs and install charging to school buses, but also light duty and medium duty vehicles. So lots of stuff out there. Happy to point you in the right direction for those resources. But federal tax credit. I will start with a big caveat that this is the federal tax credit as it currently exists. The incoming administration has made it very clear that it is a target of theirs to get rid of this. They can't just do that unilaterally. They have to either pass a new law or basically change the rules of how they administer it to basically render it non-existent. So big caveat, if you're thinking about getting an electric car and have the ability to do it by the end of the year, probably a good idea. And we've heard anecdotally that there's lots of demand right now for that reason. But as it currently exists, there's a federal clean vehicle credit available for new and used cars, but the rules are slightly different for each of those categories. So for new cars, the amount is up to $7,500. I say up to because it depends on the vehicle model. There's really complicated requirements around batteries and components and assembly location. The easiest thing to do is to just look up the list, and I can show you where to do that and see which vehicles are eligible for how much, but it's up to $7,500. Per the Inflation Reduction Act, it should be in place until 2032. We'll see what happens about that next year. You can claim this tax credit when you file your taxes, which is the normal sort of familiar way to get a federal tax credit, but you can also get it at the point of sale because the Inflation Reduction Act has a provision to make it available at the point of sale. Either way, you have to go through a dealership that is registered with the IRS Clean Energy Portal, and the way to figure that out is to ask them. To qualify, your income must be under a certain limit, so for joint filers, that's $300,000. For heads of household, it's $225,000, and for single filers, it's $150,000. I'll highlight the one thing that is easy to remember on new cars in terms of eligibility requirements is there's a price cap. It's $80,000 for SUVs and pickup trucks, $55,000 for sedans and hatchbacks. But again, the easiest thing to do is to just go look at the list and see exactly which models and which trims qualify. For used vehicles, the rules are slightly different. So the amount is $4,000 or 30% of the sales price, whichever is lesser. It does not have the same complicated battery and mineral component requirements, so you don't have to worry about that. It can also be claimed at the point of sale or when you file for your taxes. The vehicle must be at least 2 years old and cost less than $25,000. It only applies at the first resale after the day that the Inflation Reduction Act was signed. So if you are the third owner of the vehicle, you will not qualify for this federal tax credit. This is why it's really important to go through a dealership that's registered with the IRS, because they can tell you very straight up or down, does this vehicle qualify, and if so, for how much.
There's a lower income threshold. It's basically half of the limit for the new vehicles. So for joint filers, it's $150,000. For heads of household, it's $112,500, and for individual filers, it's $75,000. It's kind of, there's lots of complications in this federal tax credit, so we made a checklist of if you're thinking about getting an EV, what you need to do. So first thing is confirm that your income, that you expect to be under the limit for the new or used vehicle, depending on which route you're going. Then you want to make sure that the dealership or store that you're working with has registered with the IRS Energy Credits online portal. Best way to do that is to ask a salesperson or general manager or both. There are unfortunately a lot of salespeople out there who might not know the ins and outs of this, so it's best to find the guy who does the EV sales and talk to that person. Ask the salesperson you're working with to confirm via that energy online credit, or whatever it's called, energy credit online portal, that the particular car that you're looking at qualifies for the federal tax credit. They should be able to look it up with a vehicle identification number and tell you. Then when you purchase, you want to make sure that you do not leave the store or dealership without two pieces of documentation. One is a copy of the time of sale report that the dealership submits to the IRS in that online portal. And the other is a copy of the confirmation that the dealership receives from the IRS that that submission has gone through. You'll need both of those when it comes time to file your taxes, because when it comes to tax season, you need to file Form 8936, even if you don't normally file your taxes, and even if you got the credit at the point of sale. You still need to file this to basically confirm to the IRS that your income is under the limit. And so when you do that, you'll need to refer back to that time of sale report. We're hearing a lot of anecdotal instances of people being told by dealers, oh, don't worry about that, you just do that at tax time, or we've got plenty of time to do that. But per the rules from the IRS, the dealership has 3 days to submit that time of sale report. And many are not doing that, so definitely make sure you get that time of sale report and a confirmation. If you lease, you might still want to pay attention to the federal tax credit, because the Inflation Reduction Act also created a commercial vehicle tax credit, which is the tax credit that municipalities would actually take advantage of through direct pay when you purchase an electric vehicle, or if you're a business, you want to purchase a vehicle. But it creates kind of a loophole in that if you are a leasing agent, basically, you can claim the commercial vehicle tax credit when you purchase it from the manufacturer, and many of those leasing agents are passing the value on to consumers. So you might see vehicles advertised with a $7,500 lease, like rebate or deal. That's likely the federal tax credit being passed on. So this is good to know in general, but if you have your eye on a vehicle that doesn't qualify for the federal tax credit for whatever reason, it might be good to look at the lease deals, because you might see a better deal there than purchasing. I'll move now to Massachusetts. Massachusetts has a state rebate program called More EV. It's got lots of different sub-programs. I'll go through them at a high level. The standard one is the one that you're probably most familiar with. It's been around for forever at this point. It is $3,500 for new battery, electric, or fuel cell vehicles that cost less than $55,000. And this one's available to individuals, businesses, and nonprofits. Then there's More EV Used, which is $3,500 for a used electric vehicle that costs less than $40,000. I just want to flag, for the federal tax credit, the limit is $25,000, for the state rebate it's $40,000. Different limits, a little confusing. But this one is only available for income-eligible buyers, so you can prove your eligibility by participating in one of the income-eligible programs like SNAP or LIHEAP or WIC or any of those, or by submitting evidence of your income. So those are sort of the two base rebates, but then there's a couple adders. So More EV Plus is an additional $1,500 for income-eligible buyers. It is only available to people who participate in one of those income qualifying programs. And then there's More EV Trade-In, which is an $1,000 additional rebate if you are trading in an eligible gas-powered car at the time that you're buying or leasing an electric vehicle. And there's a long list of requirements for what an eligible gas car is, but basically it has to be at least 12 years old, can't be a hybrid, and has to be a vehicle that you've actually been driving and using, and not one that's just been sort of sitting in a parking lot or a garage somewhere. And then finally, there's also more EV truck. This is mostly relevant for businesses, nonprofits, or fleets, because it goes anywhere from pickup truck all the way to like street sweeper or cement truck kind of level of vehicles. But for individuals who want to buy a pickup truck, this is the rebate for you. This one is $7,500. It's available for the Ford F-150 Lightning, the Revvit truck, and the MSRP cap for this one is $80,000, a little bit higher to recognize that those vehicles are more expensive. So how does that all add up? You can take the base rebate of more EV standard, more EV trucks, and more EV used, and you can add either more EV plus or more EV trade-in or both. So the maximum that you can get off is on the right if you qualify for all of the adders. Basically, for a new vehicle or a used vehicle, you could get $6,000 off. For a truck, $9,000, and that's in addition to the federal tax credit of $7,500 or up to $7,500. So that is a considerable chunk off the price of a new or used EV. And this is a good time to just highlight that the average cost of a new car in general in this country right now is in the upper $40,000 range. There's plenty of EV models that start under that even before you start talking about incentives. So the market has really shifted in the last couple of years, and there's a lot more affordable options than there used to be. Granted, all cars are less affordable than they used to be. Quickly, just how to apply. You've got two options. You can either receive the rebate directly at a participating dealership. More EV is very nice, and they have a list of participating dealerships on their website. If you want to get more EV plus or more EV used, you have to pre-qualify first and bring a voucher to the dealership. But your second option is to apply for the rebate after you purchase or lease the vehicle. You can basically go to the website, submit a form, and you'll get a check in the mail within a couple of weeks. This is a friendly reminder to please review all eligibility requirements before you make any decisions, just to make sure you qualify for everything. And then these just important notes. I think these slides will be made available after the fact, but I mentioned that there are incentives to install charging. That's true whether you're in a single-family home or a multi-family home, in National Grid territory, Eversource territory, and we've got a page that walks through all of those. And then there are also incentives both for vehicle purchases and installing charging for municipalities. And on school buses in particular, the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, I'm sure you know this, has a really great program called Mass CEC Act School Bus, where they have free advisory services for municipalities that want to electrify their school bus fleets. And it's a great place to start because they can make sure that you see all the federal incentives, which may or may not exist next year, but make sure that you're aware of all the incentives and can learn from what they've learned from other communities in Massachusetts so far. So that's it, and I'm not sure who I should pass this back to.
I'll take it. Thank you.
Great, well, thanks to everyone. There's a big, wide breadth of information on EVs. And I do want to stress, if you want the slides, you can sign up on the, sign in at the front table, and I can email them to you. And now we can open it up for any questions.
I was wondering if Ross could expand on options for people who live in condos or apartments or can't, like on-street options that might be available.
Yeah, so in Newton, we don't really have a lot of on-street options yet. A lot of those are coming, they're starting to come out through, sort of cities are planning around that. But there is now a state law around sort of just generally a lot of things to help with a lot of the climate work in the state. But one of them is that if you live in like a condo or an apartment building, you can't really be prevented from putting in charging at your condo building, even if your condo association says that they don't want you to. If you have like a reasonable, sort of way of putting it in that doesn't disrupt a lot of other things going on at the property. So it's called right to charge, and pretty much if there's a way to sort of submit a proposal to your condo association to say, I really want to put a charger in, these are the costs, this is what it's gonna mean, and essentially this law is meant to protect you so that you don't get sort of harassed or prevented from doing that by your condo association. That's mostly for owners. There are certain, I don't think Newton is one of these cities, but there are some cities that also provide that protection for renters. But if you are a renter, I would say, again, talk to the EV task force. It's going to be a little bit more of a personal conversation, maybe with your landlord or something, so we can help provide you some of the information to support that. Yep.
I have a follow-up to these two questions. So we recently had an experience. We looked at a condo in one of the villages of Newton, and the building didn't have chargers. But what struck me about it is that the real estate agents had no clue about anything. When I said, what about a charger after we saw the unit, right? Charger? Never thought of it. And I said, is there any charger anywhere here? I don't know. We walk around the village, we didn't see any. What would it take to install a charger? I don't know. So I think that real estate agents need some training about this. I mean, they completely, well, those that I met, which was 2, right? Completely clueless. They were taken aback by the question. So finally, I got the questions. So is this a deal breaker? I said, yeah, we have one car and it's electric. And that's the end of this story, right? So I don't know whose responsibility it would be. Maybe Consumers Alliance could do something like that, just at least minimally inform real estate agents about the basics, that you are allowed to install a charger, nobody can stop you.
That law was just passed probably
What-
after you looked at the condo, actually.
Well,
It's very new.
or what is the plan? I
If-
finally called my friends at City Hall and I asked them, so what is the plan for chargers in Newton Highlands? Well, I think there is going to be one maybe within the next 2 years, but we're not sure. Okay, I'm not complaining. What I'm saying is it should be much more explicitly informed, right? People should know, okay, in 2026 there will be a charger here.
Yeah,
Okay, good.
The reality is that no one knows, like there's no grand sort of organizer of the charging infrastructure, unfortunately. It's all very kind of ad hoc in different places. And as Leslie said, I mean, the regulations are just changing all the time. And so even this law about right to charge it literally got passed like 2 weeks ago or something.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I would just say like that experience that you had and you telling that realtor, this is a deal breaker for me, that is what's going to cause the change. Like people need to understand that there is a like monetary impact to not having this knowledge, and it's going to be slow and probably painful. And right now, I could probably speak to this as well, but like EV owners are still very much early adopters, and they're the ones that are sort of cutting their teeth on a lot of these challenges. And I think it's just going to require more of us to continue to advocate and do this work.
Can I react to that directly? So in terms of the charging infrastructure in Newton, there actually is a plan. We have been working with the city for at least 2 years to get more chargers close to apartments and condo buildings. So it is not that it is haphazard and that there is no planning. So what I really wanted to say is we didn't talk at all about batteries. So on an evening like this, where there is a storm going on night, we could easily have a power outage. Now, the newest cars already have a two-way charging system where you can use the car battery as a backup for your house electricity. And this is the future. So you have not only to think about your electric vehicle as a standalone thing that is charging, but it will be part of your electric infrastructure. And very soon we will have a collective system where all the all the electric vehicles through their charging infrastructure will be able to power houses in cases of infrastructure outage. Also, I want to say that the price of batteries will go down considerably. There are lots of downsides about the batteries that we also didn't mention, mining, etc., etc. But there is, of course, a lot of innovation in developing new batteries with less corrosive materials. So we leave it at that.
Can I add something to that? Because there are some places where they electrify the school buses and they put, and in the summertime when they're not being used, they have all this battery power from all these school buses that can put electricity back into the grid for a large number, not just for one person's house, but for a whole community. So it's a big resource that way too. Yeah.
Now, I have a question about what happens to your battery if you don't drive the car for a couple of months? Like if we go away as snowbirds someplace,
Yes.
Does the battery need to be used?
I looked into that when I was traveling, and I was advised to just leave it plugged in my garage, and then it's automatically going to, I have it set to charge overnight. It's not going to lose a lot. It'll lose a little, not a lot, but that way it will, if you just leave it for 3 months, the battery will go down a bit, even if you're not driving it, right? Just like your phone would.
But it's not detrimental to the health of the car to be left.
Oh,
Like
to the health
your
of the
regular
car?
gas
No.
car, if you leave your car, not driven for a
I
few
know,
months,
I've
it's
done
not good
that,
for
and it
it's
was
not
a
good for your
mess.
car.
Yes,
So I usually have somebody
drive it.
drive my car once a week
Yeah.
just to.
It's not detrimental, but I did leave it plugged in so that it could keep it topped off. I think another reason, maybe, I don't know what happens to the tires if you just have it sit for a really long time, any car. I think that's one reason that you're supposed to drive it, but it's not going to screw up the fuel injectors, which happened to me once when I left my car for a long time.
Lizzie, if you're leaving your car for, let's say, 2 months or whatever, you have it on a timer, so it's not charging the entire time that you're going.
Right. You
It'll
can
be a
program
certain
it.
hours during the day. It's charging till it gets to, what, 80%?
80%, right. Yeah.
And actually on a gas car, it doesn't have to be driven. We've done this, there's something called a trickle, and it's connected in our Prius to an outlet, and it just gives a little bit of its connection to the battery so it doesn't die on a gas car.
You mean a regular battery?
A
for the
regular
gas car?
battery
Oh, yeah.
in a regular
Oh.
car. When we've gone away, my husband calls it a trickle.
Oh, so that might be one
And the
reason they
hood's
have to
open
drive
just
it,
a
because the
little.
battery in a regular gas car
Oh, okay.
would also.
That's a question.
I just, I also have concerns about the cobalt and the nickel that's used in the mining of the batteries. It seems like it's a really environmental concern that, and I also have questions about the recyclability of electric vehicles, especially the battery.
So, yes, I can, well, if someone else wants to say something, but I actually had slides on this that I was gonna. So, yes, there are problems with cobalt. We've all heard about the child labor, et cetera. There are problems with lithium mining. There are new ways to get the lithium that aren't so problematic. And they are also developed, which is brine. I'm not an engineer or an expert, but there are better ways to get it. And they're also working on other kinds of batteries. So I think sodium is a new thing. In terms of the metals that are needed, they recycle those. I mean, just like when you give your phone, why did someone just give me $150 for a really old phone? I think they're going to take the metal out. And you can recycle the battery. So once the battery seems unfit for a car, when it's lost, maybe 20, 25% of its charging capacity, it still has use in other applications, and people have been buying used batteries. There's a market for used batteries, and they put them together and they do other things with them. Tesla in one other country is refurbishing used batteries and then selling them to people who are still driving an electric vehicle but want an updated battery because theirs is worse than the refurbished one. So they're not just throwing them into a landfill.
All right, one other question, if I may. Hydrogen now seems to be coming back. Toyota spent billions of dollars on that technology, and they seem to be coming back again. Do you think it would outdo electric vehicles?
I doubt it. I think that the momentum is with electric, and I don't know what they're doing with hydrogen. I know that hydrogen is really not something we want in our fuel pipes. I know that the electric company thinks they can be green by adding hydrogen to the methane that comes into our homes, and that's really a bad idea, but I don't really know about hydrogen. You're talking about fuel cell batteries?
Yeah,
that's
fuel
different
cells,
from hydrogen.
Yeah.
I think that Toyota missed the boat, but maybe, and fine, if there's something else, that will be, let the market decide which is better. I don't think that's necessarily bad.
Well,
Does someone else know something about
you
that?
invest in the cost of infrastructure is enormous.
Yeah.
You either invest in chargers or you invest in hydrogen refueling.
But we don't have the
stations.
cars, so why would anyone do that now?
No,
we have the
what
electric
I'm
cars.
saying is you say, let the market decide, why don't we have both? It's a little more complicated.
I don't know what the fueling of hydrogen cell cars would be.
5 seconds.
No, but is it gas? I mean, do we still have gas pumps? Do we still have to pump gasoline?
No,
No.
you just take out one and put in the other.
Oh,
Yeah.
So different automakers are making different bets here about what technology is going to win out. And Honda and Toyota, despite having Toyota at least being early in the battery game, seem to be betting on hydrogen.
Yeah.
What our view at Green Energy Consumers is that hydrogen will likely have limited but specific use cases. The benefit of hydrogen is that it's light and you can refuel quickly. And so you can get a lot of mileage on a small amount of weight. And so that might be very useful in long distance trucking, heavy duty vehicles, maybe maritime applications, maybe aviation. I don't know, I'm not an engineer. But the lightness and the speed of refueling, I think, are more useful there. The problem, if you're talking about passenger vehicles right now, is that if I've recently somebody was telling me all about how great hydrogen is, and I looked at a map. Went to the Alternative Fuels Data Center and said, show me how many alternative fuels charging stations there are in New England. There are 0 functioning hydrogen refueling stations, but several thousand functioning charging stations for electric vehicles.
Yeah.
So it is very expensive to build them. You have to get the fuel there, whereas we already have a distribution system for electricity.
Yeah.
From an environmental perspective, often when you talk about hydrogen fuel cells, people say, oh, the only exhaust is water. And that's true at the vehicle, but you still have to produce that hydrogen fuel. You have to split hydrogen atoms from oxygen atoms, and they don't want to do that. And right now the main way that we do that is by burning fossil fuels. And so if we want to get to a point where we have 0 emissions, we can produce hydrogen fuel with electricity, but at that point there's efficiency losses where if we just fueled an EV in the first place, it would have been better. So all of this brings me back to, I think there will be specific use cases for it, but I'm not personally convinced that passenger vehicles is going to be it. There's also, coming back to the point about mining and battery recycling, I think battery chemistry is changing all the time in ways that we as consumers do not see. So a lot of people, when you say mining, immediately say cobalt, and that's because 5, 6, 10 years ago, cobalt was really predominantly used in I think the cathode in electric vehicle batteries. the market has shifted. We're no longer doing the nickel, manganese, cobalt, it's all lithium iron phosphate. So suddenly cobalt is already no longer as big a part of EV batteries as it was. Of course, anything you're pulling out of the ground, there's no way to pull, there's no environmentally and socially perfect mining anywhere. The benefit with EVs is that hopefully we have less mining to do, because once you've built the things, you can recycle them. There's a lot of recycling capacity that's up thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, and I could talk about that more. But with fossil fuels, you will have to continue mining forever, and that has impacts too. So I wanted to just bring those two comments together.
Yes.
Good.
If I may, yeah, I'm a little bit triggered to what you said, but in my view, we also need to look at the size of cars and about the use of cars. Because if we focus about electric vehicles, we only look at the fuel, right? And what Anna just said is completely right. If you have an electric car, you get the electricity directly from your windmill or your PV. And if you do it through hydrogen, you have to transform it and then transform it back into electricity. There's a lot of losses. But I now see these enormous SUVs, and people are driving in them like they did before. So there's no change in any behavior. And we are fooling ourselves if we think that we can continue to use steel, glass, rubber, and all these precious metals in these enormous vehicles if we don't go back to smaller vehicles, more sharing of vehicles, less use of vehicles, and using other forms of transportation. And I think it's very important to expand the conversation also to that point. So thank you very much.
Agreed.
I agree.
That's a good point.
As a bicyclist, I've just noticed that over the decades, the cars are bigger and wider, and it's just a very good point. Yeah.
So I want to thank all of you for all of your great questions and for coming out in the rain. And I want to give another hand for our presenters. And I think we can wrap up. Have a wonderful evening, and thank you again for coming.
Thank you.